let's get started. So let's get started with the deep learning algorithm questions. So first question is, what is the feed forward neural network, FNN? So a feed forward neural network means FNN is neural network where connection between the node do not form a cycle. Means it doesn't form a cycle. So basically the meaning of FNN. Next is, what is the backpropagation? So what do you mean by backpropagation in the deep learning model? A learning algorithm used to adjust gate in the neural network. Before the backpropagation, you just go in the forward direction. After going the backward direction, it will adjust the bit. First, you just give the random bit. After the backpropagation, you adjust the bit according to your target variable. Next question is, what are the activation function in the neural network? Oh, activation function, what are the activation function? So some activation function like sigmoid, 10x, ReLU, leaky ReLU that introduce the non-linearity into the model. Next is, what is the convolution neural network, CNN? So a neural network is specialized in processing grid-like data such as image. So basically, if your data is like grid-like in the image, you can say like you just split the data into grid, and after that you are processing each grid. So a neural network that is specialized in processing grid like structured data such as image and videos. So what are the main component of CNN? So main component of CNN is convolution layer, pooling layer, and fully connected layers. So these are the some main component of CNN. Next question is, what is the purpose of convolution layer in CNN? This is the good question interview can ask in your interview. So to automatically and adaptive learn spatial hierarchical of features. That's mean you can just say the what is the meaning of purpose of convolution layer. You just want to extract the features, importance of features. So that's the meaning of the convolution layer. You are just capturing the features from the image or video data. Next is, what is the role of pooling layer in CNN? What do you mean by pooling? To reduce the dimensionality of feature map while retain the importance information. Why you are using the pooling layer? To reduce the dimensionality. If you want to reduce the dimensionality and you want to retain important features, then you can use pooling layer. What is the recurrent neural network, RNN? A neural network designed for sequential data using connection from directed cycle. Means in the RNN you are just giving the input of your backward class. That's the meaning of RNN. A neural network designed for sequential data, like sequential data means text and time series also. Next is, what is the vanishing gradient problem in RNN? A problem where gradient become very small, making it difficult to learn long-term dependencies. So this is the variance gradient problem in RNN. If your like sequence is like if your text sequence is like or text or anything sequence is like go beyond the 30, then it will getting the forget all those things little bit. So this is the vanishing gradient problem in RNN. How do you use minimize the vanishing gradient problem using the LSTM? So that is the one question you can think about that. So next question is, how does an LSTM network address the vanishing gradient problem? By using gate to control the flow of information and maintain long-term dependency. In the RNN, this is a simple backward connection. You are just going the in the forward direction, and if you get the simple RNN output and you just give the that output to the another RNN, and you are going in the sequence. So instead of this, you are forgetting. So that problem solved by the LSTM. So LSTM is using gate to control the information. Next question is, what are the gate in the LSTM? There are three type of gate in the LSTM: input gate, forget gate, and output gate. Next question is, what is the generative adversarial network? What is the GAN? So GAN is a neural network consisting of generator and a discriminator that compete against each other. Means generator is want to generate anything of the data, like you can say like image. If generator want to like generate the real image, and your discriminator want to see if your image is real or not, something like that. How does the generator in a GAN work? By creating synthetic data to fool the discriminator. You just want to create a synthetic data and you want to fool the discriminator. If your discriminator is not able to capture is your synthetic data is like generated data, then it means you just train the GAN. Next question is, what is the role of discriminator in the GAN? Same thing, to distinguish between the real or synthetic data. Next question is, what is a very good question. What is an autoencoder? So basically, an autoencoder that learn to encode data into a compressed form. Means if your data is in compressed form and you are learn from that compressed form and want then after that decode it back to the original form. That's the meaning of autoencoder. Next question is, what are the main component of autoencoder? So an encoder and decoder. So there is encoder part and decoder part. Encoders could be LSTM, CNN. Same thing in the decoder could be LSTM, CNN, or combination of both and any other of the model you can use in the encoder or decoder. So next question is, what is the purpose of the encoder in the autoencoder? This is the good question. What is the purpose of encoder in autoencoder? To compress the input data into a latent space representation. So that's the meaning of the encoder in the autoencoder. What do you mean by latent space? Now the question, what do you mean by latent space? So basically a latent space means a compressed or lower dimension version of your data where the most important feature are extracted. Means you extracted most important feature in the lower dimension. That's the meaning of latent space. So basically latent space means a compressed or lower dimensional version of data where the most important feature are extracted. Means a compressed form of your data where you extract the most important feature in the low dimension. So that's the meaning of the latent space. Next question is, what is the purpose of decoder in autoencoder? So what is the purpose of decoder in autoencoder? To reconstruct the input data from the latent space representation. What is the meaning of encoder in autoencoder? To compress data, to compress the input data into a latent space, and decoder is to reconstruct the input data from the latent space. So that's the meaning of encoder and decoder in autoencoder. Next question is, what is dropout in neural network? This is a good question. What is meaning of dropout? A regularization technique that randomly drops neuron during training to prevent overfitting. You just reduce, or you can say you just drop during the training back propagation. Next question is, how do you choose the architecture of neural network? How do you choose? You don't know how many convolution layer you want to check, you how many LSTM layer, how many dropout. How do you know? So based on the complexity of the task and size of your data, how do you choose architecture of neural network? Based on the complexity of task and size of your data. Also, you have some optimization technique like random search CV or grid search CV. You can search how many grid or all those things, how many LSTM you can give there, and you can get the idea how many layer, how many, whatever you give the input, you can get the idea. Next question is, what is the difference between training and validation loss? What do you mean by training loss and validation loss? Training loss measure the error on the training data, while validation loss measure the error in unseen data. In the training data, the error you are using like measure the error on the training data. Validation loss measure the error on unseen data. That's the meaning of training or validation loss. Next is, what is the batch normalization? This is a good question. What do you mean by batch normalization? A technique to normalize the input of each layer to improve training speed and stability. Every time if you are giving the data into batches, and if your every batch data is following the another distribution, so why the normalization? You just want to keep your data into the same normalization. So that is the technique of batch normalization. Is technique normalize the input of each layer to improve training speed and stability. Next question is, what is the purpose of using multiple layer in the neural network? So using a multiple layer means you just want to learn the more complex representation of your data. Simple thing. If you using single layer, that will not be good. So you can use multiple complex representation. Next is, what is overfitting in deep learning? What do you mean by overfitting in deep learning, especially when a model perform well on the training data but poorly on the validation data? Like if you are training accuracy like 90%, but your validation accuracy is like 55%. So means your model is overfit. Next question. Next question, how do you prevent overfitting in the deep learning model? So how do you prevent overfitting in deep learning? Using technique like dropout, early stopping, data augmentation, or you can reduce the number of layer add, or you can increase the number of layer. All those things is the technique for preventing overfitting. Next is, what is the transfer learning? This is the very basic question. What do you mean by transfer learning? Already you have a model which is already trained on the high dimensional data, and if you want to use that model on your data, you just to remove the last layer of that model and train based on your data. That's the simple meaning of transfer learning. So a technique where is pre-trained model is fine-tuned on a new task. That's the meaning of transfer learning. A technique where a pre-trained model is fine-tuned on a new task. Next question, what is the purpose of using a validation set? So to tune, what is the purpose of using a validation set? What is the purpose of using a validation set? You are training your model and you are giving the training data. Why you are using that to split the training data into training and validation part? So to tune hyperparameter and evaluate the model performance on unseen data. That why use two validation set while you are using the training. Next question is, what is the difference between an epoch and batch? What do you mean by epoch and batch? You are giving the batch size 128, 32, and epoch you are select 100, 50. So what do you mean by this? An epoch is one full pass through the training data. Means an epoch is one full pass through the training data, while a batch is subset of training data. Means if you are selecting the 32 in your image data, means in a one set you are just passing 32 images, and after if you have like 100 images in your data set, training data set, so you are passing first 32, after that next 32, next 32. Every epoch when uh, continue, then you just pass all 100 epoch, then it will make your one epoch after that. So next question is, what is learning rate in neural network? A hyperparameter. This is the hyperparameter, obviously. A hyperparameter that control the step size during gradient descent. So how much like you move your gradient in your like neural network. So this is the hyperparameter learning rate. If your learning rate is high, then you just go randomly very fast. Next question is, what is the gradient descent? So gradient, what is do you mean by the gradient descent? And optimization algorithm that used, why you use to minimize the loss function by updating model performance, model parameter, sorry. So a optimization technique used to minimize the loss function by updating model parameters. Next is, what is loss function? Gradient descent, what is loss function? A function that measure the difference between predicting and actual value. That you can say the loss function. So loss function that measure the difference between actual value and predicted value. Loss function could be RMSE, loss function could be mean square error, M. All those are the example of loss function. Next question is, what is the purpose of using optimizer in neural network? Why do you use optimizer in neural network? Is necessary. So to update the model parameter based on the loss function. If you don't use optimizer, then no is no sense of making the neural network, because you cannot update all those things. So to update the model parameter based on the loss function. So this is the use of optimizer in neural network. Next question. Next question is, what are the common optimizers used in deep learning? So one is the SGD, stochastic gradient descent, Adam optimizer, RMS swap, and ADA grid. So these are the some common optimizer in the deep learning. Next question is, what is the role of activation function in neural network? Activation function is introduced non-linearity into the model. Like if your model, so simple meaning of the activation function is used to you want to introduce non-linearity, because every time if you want to like classify the classes or regression line, it never is the straight line. It could be anything. So that's why you use non-linearity function like activation function. So you just want to introduce a non-linearity into the model, because every the regression line or the classification line, it should not be the linear. So that's why you just want to introduce the non-linearity. So different type of activation function you can use adding the non-linearity into the model. Next question is, what is the purpose of using deep neural network? So what is the purpose of using deep neural network? You just want to filter out more complex pattern. That's why you just use the deep neural network to model complex pattern in the data with multiple layer of abstraction. Next question is, what is the difference between shallow and deep neural network? What do you mean by shallow? So shallow means shallow network have fewer layer and deep neural network have many layer. Simple. This is not like the question interview can ask, but it's okay. Next question is, what is the embedding layer in neural network? What do you mean by embedding layer in the neural network? A layer that convert categorical variable into the dense vector to fixed size. This is the question you can think like, what is the use of embedding layer in neural network? A layer that convert categorical variable into dense vector of fixed size. Fixed size is important. What is data augmentation in the deep learning? If you have low data and if you want to generate the data which come from the same space, so that's you can use data augmentation like flipping or any other technique in the image, or like in the time series you just in the speech recognition you can use data augmentation. So a technique to artificially increase the data of training of the training data set while creating modification version of your existing data of your, you can say that, your data. A technique to artificially increase the size of training data while creating modification version of your existing data. Next question is, what is the purpose of using a softmax activation function? So basically, why you use softmax function? To convert logic into probability for multi-class classification. Before using softmax function, you have a value. Activate softmax function, it will give you, if you want to like only 10 value, if you want to like predict the 10 classes, so whatever value you get like 1000, so it will assign a probability only 10 value if you just want to predict only 10. So that's the meaning of softmax activation function, to convert logic into probability of multi-class classification. Next question is, what is the vanishing gradient problem? Already covered this question. A problem where gradient become very small, hindering the training of deep neural network, means like block the training of deep learning model. That's the meaning of vanishing gradient problem. If you have facing the vanishing gradient problem, then it will block your training in the deep learning model. So this is the video related for 100 machine learning of or deep learning questions. So I hope you enjoy this video and it will add us some knowledge when you sit in the interview. So if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Epsilon Academy for more such content. Hit the bell icon so you never forget an update. So let's grow together in the amazing field of AI and machine learning and deep learning. Thank you. Thank you, friends.